This week, Kumar and Dana talk about the webcomic Achewood by Chris Onstad. First, I'd like to thank our patrons for keeping this show going. Join them at patreon.com/deconcomics. If Patreon isn't in your budget, you can also send a one-time donation of any amount via PayPal to donate@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
This is Kumar.
And this is Dana.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar in Melbourne, Dana in Shizuoka. I couldn't even remember how to introduce the show a second ago, because we're doing so
Perfect.
few of these. We're doing very few of these now. The show is kind of grinding to a strange kind of halt because of Tim's busyness, but we're still trickling out episodes. Today we're going to talk about Achewood, the famous webcomic.
Keeping it topical.
Yeah. This is also a constant problem with the show, is doing stuff set really late. And we're very late to this game. It started in 2001. I always thought we should do it, and I hadn't read it. I'd only read bits and pieces, but I knew it by reputation and thought we should actually maybe get around to this at some stage. And when I asked you if you had any suggestions, it was like the first thing out of your mouth.
Yeah.
So why was it your choice? And
that's a good question. Yeah. So I was introduced to Achewood, like 10 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe more. It was at work. One of my work buddies brought in 2 or 3 of the books. He had actually bought a few volumes of the books that were published. So I read those at work and was like, okay, this is fantastic. And then from there, kind of just hit the website and read it. So to be honest, I hadn't really thought of Achewood for years. I don't think you mentioned it. Basically ended in 2016, so it had a really long run. Yeah, I don't know. There was nothing particular that really prompted it recently. But yeah, when you asked, I was just kind of thinking like, wow, what haven't we talked about that I love or that I think would be interesting? And yeah, this just came to mind.
Right. And another thing that happens with these shows is before we start recording, usually whoever I'm recording with says, okay, how do you want to structure this conversation? And I'm like, no, I don't like doing that. I'd rather just go in and wing it. And then usually whoever's my co-host is annoyed by that. And then we start recording anyway. This time I really didn't want to do that because I think the whole thing about how do we even talk about this comic is part of the whole discussion about it. Because it's so weird and it changes so many times, and I don't even know. I mean, over the years it changed a lot, and I don't know. It's actually, I'm going to make a comparison which maybe I'll regret later, but it kind of reminded me of Crazy Cat in that you read a couple of them and you're like, this is the strangest, nonsensical thing. Why am I reading this? I don't want to read any more of it. But then you read about 1,000 of them and you're like, there's something going on here.
Yep.
And there's some kind of hidden genius to it. But you gotta read a whole bunch of it for it to make sense. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. I don't know. It's just a thing I'm throwing out there. It's a hot take that you can accept or not.
Well, maybe a good start would, I don't know if it's necessary, but perhaps we should introduce it a little more. I think we mentioned the title is Achewood.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I basically a webcomic, as we mentioned, from 2001 to 2016 by Chris Onstad. Still available at www.achewood.com. It's how would you describe it?
Well, let's start with the characters. I think that's kind of, because it's kind of a sitcom, with a whole bunch of characters.
And it really starts out as almost exclusively like a 3-panel type strip early on. And it certainly changes from that, but that's kind of how it basically starts out.
Yeah.
And you have this cast of really kooky, diverse kind of characters, which I believe are mostly based on pets and stuffed animals owned by Onstad.
Okay, I didn't know that. There's certain stuff you don't. So we haven't, and we're gonna have to bounce around because again, I don't know how to talk about this comic. But there's like a whole bunch of blogs and stuff written by the characters as well that kind of go along with it. But the problem is if you read, as I did, the strips in order and you just click next, you don't interact with the blog. So there's a lot of information, I think, that's in there that's not in the strip. So, like, I went to the Wikipedia page and I just went for a list of characters, and they described the type of cat that Ray was. Now, I read every single strip, and there is no description of his species, as far as I can remember. And I don't even remember Philippe, or Philip, or, well, I don't know how to pronounce it.
I call him Philippe.
Okay, Philippe. We don't even discover that he's an otter, I think, until 2013. Or not 2003. 2003. I think it's 2 years later. But then, there's a little strip earlier that mentions something about an otter, and maybe it was referring to him. But I think it's clearly stated in 2003. It's 2 years later, before you even find out what he is. Other characters, you don't even really know what species they are. And then I read this thing that they were stuffed animals, and I was like, where did that come from? And I think there's a Halloween strip in 2001 that maybe mentions some of this stuff, and I'm not really sure.
Yep.
But there's Ray, who's the cat. He is a hip-hop record producer. Apparently he's super rich, too, but I don't think we knew that, again, until, 2003 or later.
So that actually happens in the strip early on.
Okay.
So you have so you've got Ray, Pat, and roast beef, and they're sort of the 3 kind of neighborhood bad boys. They're introduced. It's in 2001.
Okay.
2002. January 10th is, I think, the first appearance of those 3, and they kind of show up, and they're sort of these 3 guys are standing around smoking cigarettes, just kind of being the neighborhood badasses.
But they're not the badasses compared to the characters that have actually been to prison, who are Todd. Nice Pete and Lyle.
Nice. Yeah. Oh no, they're not really badasses. They're more just like the guys that hang around that your parents might sort of mildly disapprove of or something like that. But there is actually a short arc, and I didn't actually make a note of when it was, but it's fairly early on. Ray does something and just instantly makes millions of dollars.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very it must have been in 2002 or something, and he becomes rich. However, I do think his I guess his family is at least kind of middle class, although his father is kind of
that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. He's not from. I don't get the sense he's from a wealthy family, but his mom is maybe middle class, has a house in the suburbs kind of thing. But I do remember actually kind of noticing that, because I didn't remember that he kind of made this money. I just thought, he's rich, as you say. But there is actually a little bit where he gets that money initially. Okay. Yeah, so he's kind of this hip hop business mogul. He's always kind of trying to take advantage of new ideas and stuff, and not always in the kindest of way as well.
Right.
Pat, racist, homophobic, gay.
Well, I don't know how
homophobic
he's right. He's gay because it's a family curse. So his father, I think they all become gay when they're 26. All the males in the family turn gay when they're 26.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then there's Theodore. It's spelled Theodore. I don't know how we're supposed to pronounce it again.
Doesn't it have an accent and maybe Theodore?
Theodore,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so I don't know what his deal is. He's one of the guys is a computer whiz. Maybe that's roast beef.
Beef. Yeah.
Okay, roast beef is. Suddenly we discover he's depressed. There's a strip where it's revealed that he's depressed, and from that point on, which to me was like when we learned that Ray was rich, which I guess I was incorrect about. It was just a suddenly like pow. This character is depressed, and now that becomes a running thing from that point on. Lyle is a super gross. He's a supporting character. He's always there's always something about him. Like there's one strip I remember where he's man-douching himself, as he calls it, and he's squatting in a bowl of vinegar. And there's another where they open a taco stand, and at some stage Lyle comes by and wipes his pits with the tacos and puts them back, and reveals that they made him feel powerful or something like that. And I'll remember some more as I think at one point he plays this trick on Philippe, where Philippe wants to dress up as a boy princess, and he makes him walk around in his briefs, his underwear, with a banana sticking out the front, doing chores. Yeah. And Theodore says a line which is, "Does our front window always have to be a glimpse into the think tank for deadly sins 8 through 14? And I'm trying to. As we go through our notes, I'll find more of the gross stuff that Lyle does. Yep. But it's anytime he shows up, it's something.
Yep. He's a kind of alcoholic, unemployed bad boy.
Right.
Huge fan of oh geez, I'm totally blanking on the band name. Lemmy. Lemmy died a few years back, and they did a whole thing.
Yeah, right.
Motorhead.
Yeah. And there's Mr. Bear, Cornelius.
Mr. Bear, yes, Cornelius Bear.
He does closed captioning for like erotic TV channels, like for hard of hearing, or no, it's for blind people. What is it? It's like
closed captions for pornography.
But it includes descriptions of what's happening. Anyway, that's a kind of storyline that sometimes disappears and sometimes comes back. And
he also writes like airport novels, romance novels or whatever.
Yes, and that actually plays into a major storyline later on, but it kind of is forgotten. Philippe is kind of my favorite. He's 5 years old. He's this innocent little kid.
He's 5 years old for 15 years.
Right. But he's kind of like the Ralph Wiggum of the group. Like everything he says is this kind of very dumb little kid thing to say that's cute and funny. But he's kind of around all these really depraved environment, really. So he's kind of at the mercy, but you get his little newsletter once in a while that's always super funny, just because he's so innocent and naive and all that. It's very easy, I think, easy comedy gags.
Yeah. And I think coming off of Philippe, you've got Liebot. Speaking of depraved environment, right. Liebot, who's this robot who's just always lying. So you have this little naive child, and for some reason Philippe keeps going back to Liebot and saying, Liebot, like what is this? What does this mean?
Right.
And it's just like, oh God, why go? and Liebot just gives him the most outrageous information, usually with the intent to cause him some kind of emotional duress. This is like 2 or 3 robots that show up regularly. Liebot, then Vlad, kind of Russian ladies. I don't know if he's Russian, but Eastern Bloc European.
He's from the Balkans. We don't know. He's got a heavy accent.
Yeah.
He's known as, the first time we meet him, he's called Vlad the Makeout King. It's interesting because I'm describing all these characters and they're super hilarious, and it's funny how hard it was for me to like the strip for the first several years of it. Mm-hmm. But the characters the accumulation of detail becomes, I think, really funny. Like, as we're describing them, to me, this sounds like the kind of strip I would want to read. But
Yeah.
also strikes me when I remember, Vlad the Mega King, I feel like this Achewood, which was a popular webcomic, but I don't know anybody else, I don't know any civilians that know of it or anything. I can't imagine anybody knows about it. But if you look at any cartoon that's now on Cartoon Network, which my 11-year-old son watches a lot of, it seems like they're all based on this kind of very random, super random character humor. Like, there's shows like, I think it's Regular Show has one character's like a gumball machine, or Adventure Time. Everything is just super random and vampire characters, and I can't even describe it, but it's just like nonsense thrown together. And I don't know when they decide to stop rolling the dice on the character creation and saying, okay, this is what the character is. But
no, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I feel like this kind of character creation has influenced, maybe even directly, the way all those shows are built now.
Interesting, yeah. Well, I think part of the genius of Achewood and part of why it is so rewarding when you go along is that these characters are just so random and strange, but that's part of the genius of Onstad's writing, is that these characters become so, not all of them, but the core certainly did, become so perfectly realized that the relatively crude artwork of the strip is amazingly effective in kind of conveying really subtle reactions and expressions and things, and you just know. And the other thing is that the voices of the characters are so distinct, maybe more so than some novelists. You read some novels and when characters are talking, and they all just kind of sound the same. It's just people talking, but all of the characters have a unique kind of way of speaking. In the case of roast beef, that's of course made very, very obvious by the almost complete lack of capitalization or punctuation.
Yeah.
It doesn't start out that way, but it kind of becomes that way. So that's visually immediately apparent. But even without that kind of visual cue, the way that Lyle talks, the way that Philippe talks, the way that Libot talks, the way that Ray talks, their expressions, their inflections, the rhythm of the way they speak. So it's just even though you have these characters that are all over the place, they really develop, and maybe that kind of goes back to what you were saying, that at a glance it's not maybe a strip that's going to grab you right away. But when you make that investment of like, all right, I'm going to sit down and read a couple of years or more, like I'll read 3 or 4 years of this, and then you're hooked in. You can't leave the world until you're done at that point.
Right. I think something though, I want to know about the blogs. I want to know how much was building up in the blogs that was not in the strip.
Yeah. I have not read any of the blogs.
Okay, interesting. Because I actually, as we started this episode, as I went online, tried to find all the material, I found 2 PDFs. One was a PDF of all, so Onstad did some print editions himself, before Dark Horse put out a few books in 2008. And also in 2008, he had a feature in GQ, like he had a Achewood strip in GQ. So actually he was in the mainstream to some extent, at that stage. But he'd solo published these books, and he had some extra material, and there was like a 75-page PDF of that stuff. And then I found a PDF of blogs, and I started reading it, but then realized it was only for like 2004. And it was 100 pages. And I was like, okay, I can't do this. So I'm wondering kind of where I don't feel like, again, because of the way Roast Beef was suddenly depressed, or I feel like Todd was suddenly a jailbird. Like, I think we didn't know, like, he's a squirrel or a mouse or something.
He's a squirrel, yeah.
Okay, where did that information come from?
That's a good question.
Is that actually mentioned? I don't remember.
It must be.
But he's a silhouette. He's a silhouette of a squirrel. So,
he's a drug head, yeah.
Right, but I think we don't learn that he spent time in jail until later on. And I felt like some of this info was coming from some extra material or something. Because even when the strip ends, so the strip basically went slow to about half speed around 2009 or 10, and then was coming out very infrequently, and there was only one strip in 2015, and then there was a brief revival in 2016 for maybe 50 strips. But then at the end of that, it says it ends with kind of this, not a cliffhanger, but the story just truncates, and it says for the rest of the story, go to the blogs. And it's like, well, how do you even navigate this website to get to the blog? I'm not sure, because they're divided by character or whatever. And I didn't go to the blogs to read what the end of the 2016 story was. And I don't know if the bloggers, maybe they're even still going, who knows. But when the strip starts out, it's weird. And it's like non-jokes weird. And to me, I mean, if you look at the first strip from October 1st, 2001.
Yeah. One of my favorites.
The first time you read it, are like, okay, what the hell is going on? And it's not only... Okay, so let's describe it. It's 3 panels. It's Cornelius, Bear, and Theodore. Theodore has a drum machine. He says, we've never seen these characters in our lives. We don't know anything about anything. Theodore says, this drum machine utterly confounds me. Next panel, the same panel, but Cornelius says, we have the instruction manual for it. Theodore says, Philippe is standing on it. Third panel, Philippe, it's just 3 lines to describe a corner of a room. Philippe, apparently an otter character, standing on a white rectangle, which we know to be the instruction manual for the drum machine from the description in the previous panel.
Yeah.
The end. There is no punchline. There's not a gag. It's like non-humor almost. It's the strangest Andy Kaufman kind of like, what is this? And to me, the amazing thing about it is not just that he presented this as a gag. If this had happened 10 years into the strip, I would have been like, okay. But for this to be your debut, hello world, welcome to Achewood, this is it. I would be like, what is this? Why are we coming back for 2 days? Tomorrow, you know what I mean?
I was immediately hooked.
Right, interesting. Because I was reading, the Dark Horse collections start with The Great Outdoor Fight, which is from 2006.
Right,
and to me, that's a really interesting take, because I remember I hit, like, January 2006, and as soon as that storyline starts up, you're like, holy shit. Because it starts out with, I think, Todd comes up with this scheme to have, testicles you could dangle off your cell phone like people have off their pickup trucks.
Right.
And he's gonna market these, and somehow somehow Ray's mother gets roped into this, and then we learn about Ray's father, who was a champion in the Great Outdoor Fight, which is a big fist fight among 3,000 men out in some farm somewhere. And this turns to a whole, maybe the first really long extended storyline of the strip. I don't know why I was getting to all that, but anyway, to start with this weird strip, and then, there's a couple, and then around a few days later, we get this strip where Theodore says he's using a computer, and then he says he has to pee. He's on the phone with tech services or whatever, and he takes the phone into the toilet with him because his internet is down or something. And then he answers the phone and says, "Oh hi, it hasn't been up in 3 days." And Philippe is outside, and he hears this. He overhears the words, and it's like a gag out of Three's Company where you've misheard this line or something, and it's a weird. The first construction of a gag, and then the next day, October 8th, we got a strip where someone's at the door, and it's Stanley Tucci, and Cornelius says, "Oh man, too bad the humans aren't here. They loved him in Big Night." And then he says, "There, third panel, there he goes." And then Philippe says, "Bye-bye, Stanley." End of strip. Yep. What is this? There's no construction of a joke of any sort. It's totally surreal. There's another one. I'm going to just name one more from 2001 because it's all in October.
Yeah.
Where's the one where they're playing Scrabble, and you kind of see the Scrabble letters are forming in the air. Okay, yeah. Oh no, it's in November. So, and the caption it's October. It's November 19th. It's Scrabble. Lyle forms the word bikes. Theodore forms the word ghost. Perpendicular to that on the S of bikes. And then Cornelius Bear forms the word illegal across the G of ghosts. You got illegal ghost bikes. End of strip.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And none of this stuff really. I don't know. The first 4 years of it is like, what is going on? And there's a few, and then it starts picking up a few kind of storylines that, pick up. But I feel like there's not really any character. I don't know if there's any character building per se until 2006, when I felt like suddenly something started clicking and somehow the gags were building on top of each other and this outdoor fight just got crazier and crazier.
Yeah, and then the characters in the world really kind of start to become something more cohesive, and you sort of, it's like, oh, okay, and these characters aren't just like funny faces to deliver non-jokes, but they kind of become characters around that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about it is another amazing thing about it, more so again later on when he kind of gets the wheels are well greased, is he has this facility with the dialogue, and I guess it goes back a bit to how you're saying about they all have voices. Roast beef is hard to read for sure because of the lack of punctuation. But there's a weird, and again, it's a thing that actually reminded me of Crazy Cat. There's a line in one strip around 2005 where Theodore says, "I'm not going to Pat's. Last time I was there, I lost my diet root beer cherry." What a crazy thing to say. And they're always saying crazy things, and you usually got to read them 2 or 3 times to understand what they said. Like, there's a line, I've written down so many of these. There's one where Ray says, "Lots of hot sauces say they're extreme, but none really take you outside of your moral comfort zone." I
gotta pull up a couple of my favorites here as well.
Yeah.
2004, October 28th.
Okay.
Where is it? So the title is Chewbacca Getting Ready for the Prom. So this is kind of getting into Roast Beef's character. I won't read the whole strip. This is like 8 panels, but anyway, Roast Beef is like in the toilet throwing up because of his anxiety or whatever, and he comes out and Ray's, Beef comes out and he's like, "Oh, Ray, hey, how's it going?" And Ray responds, "How's it going with you, Mr. Hurlin, in the bathroom?" And Roast Beef's like, "Oh, you could hear that?" And Ray's response, I love this: "Could I hear it through the door? They practically evacuated the building. You sounded like Chewbacca trying to lose weight for the prom." And then it goes on for 2 more. Like, that's the joke, but the joke, but whatever. It's like, even the next phrase, like, "Seriously, Beef, if moving in with that broad is going to burn you on the molars, you got to pull the brake." Burn you on the molars, like, just yeah. This is phrasing that Ray has.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Let me find some more here. So I found, because I wrote down a bunch of them. This is 2009. So this is where Ray has started ghost writing. No, sorry, hang on. They end up writing erotic descriptions of kitchen equipment for the Williams-Sonoma catalog. This ends up with Ray. Ray gets Cornelius to ghostwrite them, I guess. And he ends up in a war of words with the president of Sonoma Williams, and they decide to have a live lesbian erotic fiction writing contest write-off live in front of
like
an
a
audience
rap
of
battle.
Right, a rap battle in front of an audience of lesbians. And I think Theodore or Roast Beef is like, this shit isn't good enough. And he's like, and so Ray is practicing. He's like, training for this contest.
Yeah.
They're going to do it also disguised as elephants, so the audience can't be biased as to which is which.
Yeah, to who's who, yeah.
And there's a line before the scene I'm getting to where Ray walks in on Cornelius writing some of this stuff. And Cornelius stops where he is, and Ray says, "You can't end this here. I got a hot nut on loan from hell." And then, so anyway, he's practiced writing, and I think it's Theodore who comes in, and he heckles him. As if he's a lesbian from the audience, and he says, "Boo, why wait so long to come down here and flick my bean, Umberto Eco?" And there's another one where Philippe approaches Ray to ask him about, what was he asking about? But he says, Ray's answer is, "You know how you feel when you see a lady?" And Philippe says, "Yeah, scared but important." I think they were talking about Pat's gayness at that stage or something like that. Yeah, so that was another thing that actually reminded me of Crazy Cat, because you can't really understand what they're saying until you read a whole bunch of it, or you reread it 3 times or something, and then you see that there's something kind of amazing going on at that level too. Regarding the drawing, I feel like he must be drawing it on a computer, right?
It's got to be, yeah.
Yeah, because it just seems like he has character models and he pastes them into place. I don't even know if he draws them new each day. I feel like he reuses the same models, or he'd have to.
Could be. Or probably just like erases a little mouth line or eyebrows that get drawn on for expression and stuff. Yeah. It's definitely very, very simple, crude even. But I think, like I mentioned before, I definitely don't want people to get the wrong idea. I think the art is, among some of the best. Just simple, but is evocative the right word? Or so the reaction. So there's a kind of a recurring thing that happens with Philippe and Libot. And I should pull up an example here, if I can. So basically, Philippe, this little 5-year-old river otter, goes up to Libot. I must have had a thing. And he says, here we go, 2003, June 3rd. I think that's the first one. So this little boy goes up to Libot, who has no morals at all. And this repeats like probably 4 or 5 times throughout the strip, where Philippe says, "Hey, Libot, what's the saddest thing?" Where was it?
Yeah.
June. What did I say? June 3rd. Yeah. Was that? No, that's not right. I'm not looking at the right page. Oh, there it is. June 2nd. Yeah. Libot, what's the saddest thing? And Libot responds, Philippe. The saddest thing is a little girl who is told by her own mother and father that she will never be pretty. And then the third panel is just this reaction from Philippe. And it's just like, just those few simple lines, and you can see this child has just been emotionally crushed. Next panel, Libot continues, and then they open the front door, and on the porch is a little white suitcase with all of her things in it. Philippe's covering his mouth. He's like, no. The expressions are just phenomenal.
I think so. I think he knows the limitations of the computer art. And I think that's kind of, like there's another really early one from October 2001, October 15, where Theodore says, "Watch how Felipe opens his mouth, it's kind of gross."
I was just going to mention that one.
Cornelius says, "Okie doke. Hey, Felipe, open your mouth." "Okay, Theodore." And he's just drawn a line with his mouth kind of, I can't describe it. Please look at the strip. If you're listening to this, it's October 15, 2001. Where his mouth kind of plops open with this half line that he's drawn.
It's almost like a garbage chute or something that's got a
Right.
hinge on the bottom
Right.
that kind of comes
And
out.
it is kind of gross, and there's a look
It's very
total
gross.
disgust on Tedor's face with a few lines, and Cornelius's hands are over his mouth, and it's really an amazing little drawing. But I find also later on some of the staging of the panels, like there's a few strips where Philippe has started writing fiction on a typewriter, and the opening panel, he's running at the typewriter from like the opposite side of the room, but it's so far away. Like the perspective is he's running across an empty room, and all the rooms are just empty, and like a corner is just 3 lines, a corner of the room. You know, there's almost no drawings of anything most of the time. But it's so funny to me the way he's running at full speed across this empty space, and it's almost like Onstad knows how much he's failed to draw anything into this space, and how much he's failed to create the illusion of a setting, the illusion of a room, because it's so not a room. It's just open. He's on a line to indicate the baseboard, you know, basically.
Right.
That's about it.
Yeah.
And there's a few panels like that where somebody enters a room to talk to someone else, and the door is just so far away, and there's nothing in the room. And they start talking to each other. So I think he kind of, I think it really does work. There's one 2005, June 29th, you see a cursor on a computer screen, and the cursor is blinking. And as far as I can tell, it's the only time he ever used any animation in the GIFs anywhere. And you barely even notice it.
What was the date on that
June
again?
29th. June 29th.
June.
2005.
Oh, okay.
And it's really kind of, you would probably even miss it. And he never did it before or since. And it's just a blinking cursor on Apple Macintosh. God, there's another thing we can talk about is the time, the place and time of the strips, because in 2002 there's all sorts of talk about IBOs. It's also, you know, the strip started in October 1st, 2001. So your first thought, and it starts with the bizarre non-joke strips, and your first thought is, this is post 9/11 non-irony strips. And to me, it's amazing that he ended with the election of Donald Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
There's something, should I read something into this or not? I don't know. But to me, those 2 dates being the 2 dates of Achewood, there's something crazy going on there. But there is, I mean, there's a line about, you know, Philippe asked Glybot, I think, do people really want to kill Americans? Like in November. So there's some kind of stuff, especially early on, that I feel dates it, not in a negative way, but it really places it.
It does, yeah. Like just maybe like half a dozen times throughout the entire run of the strip, there are very, very explicit references to real world events, and I think it's like George Bush. I think Obama maybe makes an appearance at some point. The death of Michael Jackson is there.
Yes.
So yeah, there's these few little events that kind of anchor it.
Well, it's funny too because there's some mentions of Jared, the subway guy.
Yeah.
Around 2003, before everything went to hell. There's a very funny line now about Kevin Spacey in 2007.
Yeah, I've got that noted down.
Yeah, I wrote it down. It was in one of Philippe's newsletters, and it says, Kevin Spacey is probably a good guy, but it makes me nervous that he might have secrets.
Yeah, that absolutely blew my mind when I read that.
Yeah. I feel like there was something about Cosby, too, in there somewhere. There's a few mentions of Donald Trump in there over the years.
Coming up, how changing social mores make the early Achewood strips a bit more painful to read, especially when we're not sure whether insensitive remarks are clearly the thoughts of the character or of Onstad. And how Achewood mentions details of aging and of depression that are seldom mentioned anywhere else. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week. We really appreciate your support.
Welcome to the Superman Fan Podcast. My name is Billy Hogan, and I will be your host. Before we begin our journey through the time barrier, please ensure that your red indestructible capes are securely fastened around your necks so that we may all travel safely into the past to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel in the pages of Action Comics, Superman, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, and World's Finest Comics. After we return from our journey, I encourage you to go to the website, thesupermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com. I look forward to have you join me each week to explore the Silver Age adventures of the Man of Steel.
So I've rambled on at length about a lot of stuff. Is there any aspect of this you want to tackle this from?
Well, I think I mean, if I could go back and read my favorite passages for about 2 hours, and I'm sure our listeners don't want to do that.
Yeah.
The blow tee, I just have to mention.
Okay.
Do you remember the blow tee?
No, tell me about it. I'll remember it when you.
I'll tell you about the blow tee. September 7th, 2005.
Okay.
This is genius again. Roast beef and Ray. So Ray waltzes in and he's got a goatee. He doesn't normally have a goatee, and roast beef sitting on a chair reading, turns around and says, "Oh dog, do not tell me you wear the blow tee." And Ray's like, "Blow tee? What?" Beef responds, "When a dude of gravity tries to distinguish his neck from his face by arbitrarily shaping facial hair, that is the blow tee." Okay, so a dude of gravity is roast beef's way of saying someone who's overweight, right?
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, there's another. Was that the?
Well, this whole
interrupt?
strip, right? So then two panels later, Beef says, "That thing is so hell of wispy, a spider covets." 2 more panels later, roast beef again, "Dog, I cannot brook the gossamer blow tee." This is fucking poetry.
Yeah. Well, there's another, because I mean, sometimes, I don't know where this dialogue, I feel like maybe there's a hip-hop kind of background to it, I'm not sure. But in 2015, there's only one strip, but Roast Beef gets a phone call, and he's annoyed because he wants to text before he gets a phone call. And he's annoyed by the ringing, and he says, "You know I ain't a dude of noises." And I was like, what does that mean?
See, that's a phrase, dude of consequences,
right.
Dude of noises, dude of crap. Like, that's definitely one of their phrases.
Right. But the strip you just read reminded me of a 2016 strip where Ray has taint cream to keep his taint tight. And he says, "I could have half a pillowcase down there." And he says, "What happens if it goes all opera drapes with age?" And these descriptions of his taint sagging and hanging like opera drapes, and really, But this leads into a very interesting thing, which is, so a few weeks ago, as we started reading or whatever, you emailed me and you said, "How do you feel about the use of the word fag and homo in the early years?" Now, having reread it, what's your take on that? Having gotten to the end.
Yeah, this was something that when I initially read the strip, probably was back in back around 2008, 2007. I didn't really, it didn't affect me at all. And I think it's a lot of it comes down to just sort of the atmosphere now, 2018, 2019, with, I mean, political correctness was a thing. I remember, like, when we were in university, it was a thing that we were like, what's going on? And now it's so much more than political correctness. It's like, people talk about having the right to not being offended, and like, it's absolutely out of control. And so I think I have subconsciously become a lot more sensitive to, kind of the way people speak, the way that I speak, issues of representation and diversity. And these aren't all bad things. I'm still not a big fan of political correctness, but, a lot of these issues I think are valid issues, but, the oversensitivity of a lot of people nowadays is kind of troublesome, but it's also had an influence on me. So going back a few months ago and rereading 2001, 2002, 2003, there were a few things, and I went back quickly and tried to find some examples of what was bothering me, and I couldn't even find it again. So I don't know what it was, but there was just a few things. What it was I kind of felt that. So I don't have a problem with the use of words, like, whatever the word is, if it's fag or whatever. I don't have a problem with the use of those words. When it gets to be a problem for me is when whatever words are being used to hurt, or to like hate speech, for example. You don't even have to use the word fag to say horrible things about homosexual people. And I think what happened was just early on is that some of the characters definitely have a bit of homophobia.
Absolutely.
To them. But I think.
Yeah. Sorry. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
Yeah. Finish. I was just going to say that I think in those early strips, I don't know exactly how to put it. Like Onstad hadn't earned it yet, or like he hadn't sufficiently taught me who the characters were for me to interpret those homophobic comments as being comments from the character, not comments from the author. And I think later on it becomes, well, I don't know, maybe this can be interpreted in different ways, but later on it becomes very clear that it's a character talking. So when roast beef is kind of uncomfortable with someone being gay, that's roast beef being uncomfortable with it. It's almost like that's a satire of that kind of worldview where someone can't handle other people's sexuality or whatever it may be. Yeah, so I do think that there are some. As I said, I wish I could point out an example, but I couldn't find them. I think there are some things that happen kind of early on in the strip, and it's not really like egregious, hateful stuff. It's more like stuff that I probably would have said ironically or jokingly, like in university.
Yeah.
Kind of humor that nowadays in this more kind of sensitive environment, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to make that joke. Like that joke is not really cool because it's actually quite a hurtful thing to say.
Right.
So yeah, that's I think that's kind of how it came across for those early strips. And as I said, just to repeat that point, I think later on it's earned. It's like it's the characters. They're well enough established that we don't need to judge Onstad based on what Nice Pete. Like Nice Pete, actually, I think Nice Pete maybe is not homophobic, but
no. In fact, Nice Pete gets a hand job from an old man in an Arby's when he's walking around in there naked.
Yeah,
and seems to enjoy it.
He doesn't have a problem. Yeah.
I'm gonna give you my take on this, which is you sent me this email before I'd read a single strip. So I was hypersensitive to watch out for it. But I will also point out there's this website called Oh No Robot, which has transcripts of lots of different webcomics, and you can actually put in a search term and it will search every word of Achewood for you and find out how many times the word fag is used. You could actually pull up the script, etc., if you wanted to do that. I think it is, so I think it's mostly Todd and Lyle, who are two of the kind of bad guys, the real bad guys, maybe of the strip, although Lyle, as I said before, is kind of a gross jerk. But there's no sympathy for either of those guys, I don't think. I remember another thing Lyle did was he would walk around the house carrying a vibrator, and this gave him the idea to start vibrating cappuccinos so they could alter the shape of the foam, and he would start this pervert coffee stand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Right. So I think it's mostly those two guys. I do think definitely the word fag or faggot is used as an insult. Homo.
There's a few times where things like somebody's gonna like this is gonna make you gay, like that phrase comes up.
Right. Well,
times.
even like 2002, we meet this robot called Chucklebot, who I don't think ever comes back. But we learn from Ray that Chucklebot became gay from listening to Aha, and I mean even when we get to 2008, even at the end of the strip, you've got this character Pat, who is gay and is married to a gay porn star.
Yeah.
And if you read from 2010 on, that's all fine. But if you go down to 2008, he's not gay by choice, or not by choice. He wasn't born that way. He was cursed that way. It's a literal curse.
Yeah.
I don't know quite. I feel like Onstad got better. But I think certainly it becomes less malicious. So what I think is we get characters being ignorant later on. Like Ray, what was that? I wrote this down. There was a line. Ray says, "You know that lesbians are funnier than usual people, right?" He says stuff like that. Which are just like, they're funny because of his ignorance.
Exactly.
But that's a thing that happens, I think, much later on. But even in 2009, Todd is still showing up and throwing around words like homo as an insult. Which is, I don't know, late in the game. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it's for sure it's uncomfortable. I think when it did show up, even for me in 2001, I mean, I can remember being kind of a jerk earlier, but by 2001 it was like, well, Rob Halford's gay and Clive Barker's gay, and I think I was kind of over some bridges by that stage.
Sure, yeah. Well, and I think part of it is like I don't get the sense that there's any profound or real harmful homophobia in Chris Onstad.
Right.
I've never read anything beyond this,
right.
But just the strip doesn't come across as overly homophobic. I think it's just there are strips that have a certain, like a problematic presentation.
There's a kind of bro culture, frat jokey kind of thing about them.
That. Yeah, exactly, that kind of thing. Yeah. So as I say, I kind of want to, for me, just want to differentiate. The use of the language is not the issue. It's kind of how it's framed, how it's used, what purpose it's used for.
Yes, but this is kind of the disappointing thing about it is how good of a writer he is. And all those lines we quoted before, and his command of language when he sits down and writes a sentence that nobody could have thought up. There's a whole strip that's one strip full of Yo Mama jokes that are unbelievable. They are just, this guy is a genius writer, and it's so disappointing that even to have bad guy characters, he could have had them, even if they're dumb bad guys. Yeah. He could have come up with smarter stuff for those guys to say. And I get the impression there's some stuff in there that, I mean, I don't know anything about Onstad, but there are suggestions that he's a super educated, like university educated guy, because there's mentions of stuff like Catullus. Like not a lot of comic strips out there are mentioning Latin poets. And know the material. He wasn't just throwing out the name, and he seems to know a lot about programming. I don't know. I think he's a super educated, smart dude who is a awesome writer. It just seems like that's why it's kind of a letdown. But there's something worse than that. To me, there was a character early on called Ultra Peanut, who was kind of a super racist Chinese stereotype, like the dialogue.
I think she was Japanese.
Oh, was she? Okay, either way.
Speaking of racist,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, okay, so there's a Chinese restaurant later on, too, but he does these accents for them that are really over the top. To the point where, I don't know, it's funny when Russell Peters does that Chinese accent and you can't help but laugh at it, and it seems like it's...
Yep.
I'm gonna get in trouble for not being able to define why it's not racist when Russell Peters does that voice. But it did feel really uncomfortable when Chris Onstad did it. Because he's not really a discomfort humorist. He's not into cringe comedy.
No. There is some of it there, but here and there. But yeah, that's not his overall thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like that was...
And those strips with Ultra Peanut, like, they're quite funny. Like, the arc with, like, how vicious she is to Philippe and how they're going to get married. Like, it's quite a funny, sort of tragic little arc that Philippe has. But yeah, that depiction of the Japanese girl it's troublesome. And as a footnote, and just my personal opinion, I think it is racist when Peters does it, and I don't like him.
Okay. Okay, that's good, because now we have the balance of it. So no one can say that the show was one way or the other. I will say one final word on this. There's a very funny bit. August 11th, 2004. We get a couple of pages of community college courses. Lists, and one of the courses on August 11, 2004 is Hate is a Fag. Transitional mentality course for those who hate homosexuals yet hate themselves for hating homosexuals. Course concludes with a film of a man who can put his blank into his own blank while punching himself in the face. So that's somehow the core of the whole thing is right there somewhere if you can unpack that, I think.
Yeah. Interesting.
Any other storylines we want to touch on for just being crazy that we haven't mentioned yet? Trent Reznor's Volvo of Despair is one.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just looking at my list, see if I can find any more.
Well, I think speaking of storylines, and I think this kind of goes into the next sort of big thing that I think is another part of the genius of this strip is just the genre hopping.
Right.
So there's actually, I think, a storyline. It might be called North Korea Magical Realism. This is 2009.
Yes.
And it's I don't remember which character is it Ray? Is somebody teleports to well, okay, I can't describe it because it's magical realism, and it's not magical realism. He pissed on
something. So there's an earlier storyline where there's a camera which they discover is a Mexican magic realist camera. So when you take a picture with it, it shows you what you see yourself as or what you wish to be instead of what you really are. That's the first case. And then later on we get this other magic realist thing, which is something, I feel like it was in strips, and somebody dared Todd to go out and piss on it, and Todd pissed on it, and because it was a magic realist XYZ...
It, like, teleports him away,
right,
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the poncho. As well.
Right.
And Ray ends up teleporting to whatever it was, 15th century Wales or whatever, where little nephew is, and so there's some weird surrealism, magical realism stuff going on. Horror, there's at least 2 or 3 fantastic horror arcs. I think the first one, maybe not the first one, but an earlier one, 2006, right around mid-April. Philippe runs away or something, and he meets these homeless people in the drainage ditches or something, and it's horror.
Right, that's the one where they throw out the old sofa, right?
That's it. Yeah,
they throw out the old sofa, and he goes to rescue it from the dump, and he ends up on this journey. Yeah. Okay.
And it's terrifying. Then you have Cartilage Head, who shows up a couple of times,
Right.
which
Right.
I mean that is some like Victorian era sort of, I don't know, almost like Edgar Allan Poe kind
Yeah.
of
I think
weird horror stuff.
Roast Beef died, I think, 3 times over the course of
Oh, at
the series,
least, yeah,
and
early
went to
on,
the
yeah.
afterlife. And he actually met his wife Molly there,
Yeah.
his future wife. He met her there, and somehow she came to Earth. And
Yeah,
they
there
got
was
married?
there was actually a strip that I think explained how heaven closed or something, and everybody gets sent back. But yeah, I don't remember when it was.
Right.
But yeah, he met her in heaven, and then they both got sent back to life. And then we've already mentioned it, but again, another horror one was the I've noted it here as homo horror, when Nice Pete basically kidnaps Theodore, and yeah, he ends up, he gets Theodore dares him to go into the is it the Arby's or whatever, the restaurant,
Arby's, yeah. Oh, maybe it was
completely
Denny's,
naked.
Yeah.
The Denny's. Go into that Denny's naked, and he goes in and he gets the hand job from the old man, and then I think kidnaps the old man, and Theodore ends up giving the old man a hand job in the back of the van, and yeah, Nice Pete, who is a serial killer and has some absolutely brilliant appearances with what he sees and what he thinks versus what's happening outside. It's you don't know what's going to happen. It's really quite uncomfortable.
That was frightening. That really was, yeah.
Yeah, like literally scary stuff. And I guess it's not really genre so much, more just tone. But there is some profoundly heartbreaking, depressing, and powerful emotional stuff later on.
I would also say there's some super sweet stuff. I think the Molly Roast Beef engagement storyline from 2007 is really quite sweet, where he's kind of deciding if he wants to marry her and all this kind of stuff. And I think there's some super profound stuff. Like there's a strip from 2010 in January it's called Maturation, and it shows Theodore. So again, Onstad is 15 years older, or I guess 10 years older at this stage. Let me find this thing. 2010, and it's just a diagram of Theodore and all the things how he's gotten older. I'm not losing my hearing. You're just mumbling, probably because you're going deaf. Nose runs.
Oh, this is like the game Operation.
Yes.
The game.
Nose runs incessantly for 17 minutes after waking. What purpose does it serve? Nature. If hair grows here on my body, it's on his shoulder. Wrist falls asleep every half hour during night. Dandruff and eyebrows. Shave closer to your eyes than you used to have to. Every single one. I'd say like 8 out of the 10 things on this page are literal things that happen to me that I've never heard anyone else mention as a thing that happens when you get older. And that was amazing to me. And there's another one, 2013, November 11th, where they talk about how you're getting older, and Cornelius says, I believe the individual is unfairly corralled into segmented maturity. At 21, one's head might be fleet with sums, while one's heart might be dishonest in its appetite. At 40, one might finally understand the methods of children, yet find one ethics crumbling. And that's only 3 panels of this strip, which I think is really pretty deep. Yeah.
November 15th, 2009. It's like a 12 or 13 panel page. And it opens up 4 panels of Molly, and the captions read, one by one, the long-suffering wife, so Molly's Roast Beef's wife, the long-suffering wife slips jelly beans into the mouth of a husband so crippled by anxiety that he cannot rise from bed.
Yeah, wow.
Without anything in his body, he would only get worse. And it goes on and on and on and on, and then like the last 3 panels, sometimes love is wondering if you sealed the deal just because you didn't want the other person to get hurt. Sometimes love is those fleeting, wonderful highs.
Yeah.
Sometimes love is wondering if you trapped an innocent person. This is a man who knows depression.
Yeah.
Like this is a profound illustration of, the doubt and the anxiety that. Well, I mean, not to get too personal, but like I've gone through this. I don't know. I don't know if it's a universal thing, but Jesus, like I remember some of those nights, reading before I went to bed, and just like a hammer to the face, like holy cow.
Yeah.
And then you've got Philippe standing on the user's guide to a drum machine.
Yeah. Okay. Do we want to close up by? Do we want to make any major points before we start wrapping up? Is there anything we haven't touched on that?
Major points. Yeah. So we've talked about genre, writing, art, characters, politics. Yeah. I think we've hit on everything that I wanted to hit, beyond just recording 2 more hours of reading out awesome parts of the script.
Well, I was wondering if you want to close out with some more lines, because as I've gone through my notes, I've found some more that were.
As I was reading, I was keeping a separate document of all these awesome. I've got like a page list, but yeah.
Right.
Maybe we should each close with one or something.
Oh, I gotta get at least 2 more in here. So, looking at this one from 2007. Again, most of my favorite ones are Philippe ones.
Yeah.
And it's June 28th. And Philippe approaches Lyle, which he shouldn't do. And he says they put a drinking fountain for dogs in the bathroom. What a neat decision. Lyle says, no, they didn't. That's a new bidet. Huh? What's a bidet? It shoots water up your butt. And then concerned look on Philippe's face, and then blank pant. He says nothing. Next panel he says, like in a mean way? And later on there's one where Roast Beef is talking about tampons for some reason, and he says, dang, these things got a lot smaller since my mom used to use them. She was always lugging around these Three Musketeers size cardboard one that had like a cardboard ejector and Charles Bronson on the package. Oh my God, what else is there Lyle, I found another gross thing Lyle did, which is in one panel he shows up licking a bra, which he found at the police station. According to him. God, there's a whole argument about whether helicopter, 2007, I can find this one, it's June 26th, just before, where Ray and Lyle are arguing about helicopter blades, so whether they should be sharp or dull. So Ray's on the phone, and Lyle suddenly overhears him. Ray says, you asked me they should be sharp as hell. Lyle is angry. He says, what did you just say? I said helicopter blades should have razor-sharp edges. Dude, you want the edges to be blunt so if it hits your head, it makes it explode. No, listen, who's going to look slicker in the casket, Johnny Cleanslice or Timmy Headlow? You know morticians got to rebuild the head for the viewing. Have some thoughtfulness, Lyle. You listen to me. The more of your head explodes, the faster you're out of your misery. Who cares what happens next? Everybody else, maybe. Like I said, you have a really selfish idea of how to die from helicopters. You rich bastards are so hung up on your goddamn decorum you forget what matters. And then Ray says back into the phone, sorry, Mom. So like I was... this is a conversation he was having with his mother. Amazing. Yeah, that's my last one. I will say, I think... So, I mean, I read every strip, 15 years of strips, in about 2 days. Or not 2 days. I read about a year a day or so. 2 hours a day, 1 to 2 hours a day. And this is a thing that comes up on this show all the time when we do something that's like 60 issues or 50 years, like Peanuts or something. Probably not the best way to read it. Because they were coming out 1 a day or something. I feel like I like it more coming out of this conversation than I did going in. I think the thing is it's totally not for everybody. I think even if you read it all the way through, I think some people are still not gonna, it's not gonna hook them somehow. I think it's a very specific type of strip.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, any final lines you want to read out?
I did.
Okay.
for you, Liebot, describing Australia.
Okay. I think I remember.
So, yeah, I'm sure you do. So Liebot is talking about giving up. I think Philippe is running for president, and he wants to give up, and he says it didn't work out before, and Liebot says, well, that didn't stop the Wright brothers or even the big guy himself, God. Philippe says, God? Liebot explains, look at all the planets he messed up on before he made Earth. And still, what's with Australia? They're like if England had a baby with Chernobyl and gave it a greasy hat.
Yeah.
We don't have any listeners from Australia anymore.
Yeah.
But God damn it, that's poetry.
Yeah.
Okay,
you can have another one because I've got another one, which is as soon as he realizes he broke policy and smiled, he's out of here like the skid marks in Evel Knievel's bleach load. Think about the levels it has to go through. You have to go through Evel Knievel doing crazy stunts, shitting his pants, having skid marks, putting in his bleach load, and that relating to the speed at which the skid marks leave Evel Knievel's bleach load for this guy leaving the room. Wow.
Yeah. Molly's mother says, now, just to be clear, Molly's parents live in, I don't know when it is, but
Wales? This is a fucked up thing.
But I don't know when it is. It's Wales, but I don't know when it is.
Well,
because
we know that there's one strip, where we learn that her family died in a boating accident in 1676.
Okay, so this is probably 17th century Wales,
which exists. You can go there, I think.
Yes, you can. Well, so little nephew goes there. Little nephew is Ray's nephew, and whatever. It's a whole thing.
But okay, well, I didn't see. So the marriage happens, right? They get married. Yeah. Molly's relatives come over. At this stage, I've forgotten that she had died, and he had met her in heaven. They come over. They seem like Quakers or something like that. And then you're like, okay. And then they decide to take away Ray's little nephew, with them. And then a few years later, we come back to them, and they are living in the past, it seems.
Yeah, so it's not even explained, but little nephew, he starts giving them all of these quote unquote inventions, like a toilet,
right?
And hip hop or rap, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's bizarre. But yeah, right. So as you say, there's maybe one line, some number of years earlier, where it's mentioned that her family died in 17th century.
Right.
And it is mentioned again that it is time travel, because Ray has to teleport there using the magical realism poncho or something.
But we don't know how they got to the wedding and back.
No.
Okay. Anyway. No. All right, go on.
So Molly's mother thinks, as her husband leaves for some reason, that a man knows he is a fool is the only seed which woman need sow. That's it.
Okay. That is another amazing one. All right, I don't think we can say anything else about this thing. It's out there. Try to read it. I don't know if you should start with 2001 or start with 2006. You know what? Start with 2006, because that's what Dark Horse kind of said to do with their printing of it. And if you get through 2006 and you don't feel like going further, then it's probably not. It's not for you. If you are at the end of it and you're like, I get it, then keep going and even go back to that bizarre strip about the drum machine instruction manual. That was the very first strip of all time. Crazy.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Achewood is at achewood.com. 3 volumes of it are also available from Dark Horse Comics. If you like deconstructing comics, critiquing comics, and To the Bat Poles and want to support these shows, pledge at patreon.com/deconcomics. On Patreon, you can hear Spider-Man 1963, a bi-weekly issue-by-issue look at the first year of everyone's favorite wall crawler. It's available to patrons giving at the $5 level or higher. Your Patreon support gets you bonus content while supporting the making of our free content. If the need for other work is reduced, it'll be easier for me to make more free content. Show your support by backing us for $5 a month or more at patreon.com/deconcomics. Also, please help us get noticed by reviewing us on Apple or any other podcast source. We'd really appreciate it if you gave us a star rating there and a short review. Even if it's just a sentence, tell the world why you enjoy deconstructing comics. Another way to show your appreciation is simply to write to us. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or contact us through social media. Find all the links on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. We have a pretty active Facebook group, so please sign up for some interesting comics discussion. Our theme is from bensound.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. The next episode of Critiquing Comics is next Wednesday. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.